Carolyn Middleton. I'm the Director of College Counseling, currently in my 6th year at Berkeley Carroll, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Waller, our head of school, and she can say a couple of words. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Carolyn, and thanks to you all out there. I won't stand in the way. I know this is a very exciting night in conversation, and there's a bunch of good content coming your way. But I will say, I remember the college process as a student as an exciting one and a fun one. Not always, but in the aggregate for sure. And I also feel that way as a parent. I do think that there's something about the self-discovery, that journey that students participate in with guidance from my colleagues, that's really important in this journey toward adulthood. And so I hope that you are out there thinking about it with maybe a little bit of trepidation now and then about how it might go, but mostly with a lot of anticipation and excitement. So welcome, and I'll turn back to the experts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Waller. I want to start also by saying thank you to all of you, students and parents and guardians, for taking time out of your schedules to come and spend time with us tonight. We know many of you are eager to get started, while others probably can't even believe that this moment is already here. But we want to thank you so much for your patience this fall. I know that there's some families that really want to begin the process early, and it's our policy that to provide the level of service that you and your students will want from us as seniors, we need to focus on getting that class of 2022 ready for their first deadlines and really just a couple of weeks overall. Allow me to introduce my colleagues as well. If you haven't already, tonight you're going to meet our 2 other full-time college counselors, Ms. Williams and Mr. Almonte. I can't say enough about them and enough praise for them about their expertise. The expertise they bring to our team, because it really balances us, and for their student-centered practice and work with our families. We tend to work together to shepherd students through this process and shepherd families through this process, but it's been wonderful to be back in our office because there's a lot of kind of conversations that happen at our doorways where we share ideas and share information about colleges and students. So I'm really grateful for them. As some of you know, all 3 of the college counselors have spent time working in admissions. And when we count up our hours in the profession, both in the colleges and here at BC and at other secondary schools, it's nearly 50 years of college experience. So I feel like you're in good hands. I know we all bring very different experiences to the table in our counseling practice, and we work very collaboratively with one another to ensure that we're providing the best advice. So I always like to think that working with one of us is like working with all of us. And finally, if you haven't met Ms. Dunn, who is our college office operations manager, she's been at BC for more than 20 years, so I won't tell you the full number. Without her, though, we would not be able to do our jobs. She's the one that makes everything run smoothly, and she will be in touch with you about scheduling appointments when the time comes. So thank you to you, Dr. Waller. Thank you to Ms. Moore, who wasn't able to come tonight, but was eager to, and to Mr. Hannaberry, who I know you all know quite well. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so I can go through some of the things that you're going to see tonight. Let's see. Should I do this the right way? And here we are. The adventure begins. I like to use this this little cartoon because I think it shows kind of what a lot of families are feeling at the very beginning of the process, that it feels like a maze at times. But honestly, ideally, this process is about making and having choices. The experience can feel like something you want to hide under your bed for, or it can be a really grand adventure, something that you have over which you have great agency, you've got great control, and it can also be an experience that will teach you a lot about yourself. And I'm really referring to both families and to students. You'll really learn about a lot about yourselves through this process. So the search can and should be fun, trust me. For most students, choosing a college really represents the first time that you've been making a big life decision, and honestly, we very much recognize that this decision is not made in isolation. It's certainly made with families. And it's certainly made in conjunction. We kind of think of our role with you as a partnership overall. For some families, though, you might be the first to go to college. For other families, you might be following the footsteps of family members, parents, older siblings. But in many ways, the college application process is really a rite of passage, and one that happens in very public ways. So many people are going to offer advice and want to be involved in the discussions. Obviously, your college counselors will be some main sources for you, but parents, siblings, your dean, your advisor, your friends, but also your dentist, your next door neighbor, random people on the subway. You'll have all sorts of folks that will want to comment on the colleges, will want to ask you questions about where you're going to school. Great Aunt Shirley is going to have some really, really deep questions for you about, what you're considering. And folks are going to offer some pretty strong thoughts on it, but sometimes they are ill-informed. So we always want to make sure that you're thinking about these conversations about colleges that you're going to have over the next year and a half, but also think about how you're going to sift through this advice. Some of it you will want to throw in a grain of salt. Some of it you'll want to sift through and think that's a really important point for me to think about. And we will provide a number of guidelines along the way to help guide your conversations. You're going to be very good at research by the end of this process. I know you're learning a lot about research in your American Studies class. This is a different kind of research, but you're going to be really good at it. You're going to learn to navigate college websites. You're going to discern what makes one college different from the other. At the beginning of your visits to colleges, or at the beginning of looking at colleges online, they will seem very much the same, but all of a sudden you will be able to discern one from the other and really begin to discover what makes one college different from another, what makes one college a better fit than another. It's also okay to keep your cards close to the vest throughout this process. I had a student today who was talking about wanting to log into the Common Application and add some schools. And she was asking a friend how to do that. And then she realized, and the friend would know all the schools she was applying to. It's actually okay to keep information to yourself. Just like students sometimes don't thrive in an environment where there's constant comparison of grades or test scores, comparing college lists sometimes increases that tension. So it is okay to share it with only those folks that you trust and that you want to have that kind of knowledge. And I really wanted to say a few words about this at the start of our conversation, because I do think it's really important for students to be able to find those outlets. There's fears, there's concerns, there's excitement. You want to be able to share things, but it's also easy in this process to feel like you're being judged or like it's happening to you instead of you having the ownership and the control. So it's also relatively easy with support to take the reins. And that's our goal, that you'll be able to, with support, take those reins. Parents and guardians, you're going to see students sometimes being a little bit reluctant about sharing information at first. And then once they feel more confident in what they're doing and what they're learning, they're going to begin to share a little bit more. It's always easy with support to take those reins, have an optimistic and a healthy and maybe even a balanced approach about how to do this. So what's a good way to respond when someone like Aunt Shirley says, what colleges are you applying to? And they want to engage in this whole college conversation. Sometimes it just goes like this. Why, Aunt Shirley, I've got a few ideas where I would like to go, but tell me about your college experience or cousin Janice's experience. And how did they know it was a good fit? Sometimes it's actually just as easy as that to put off those questions. Sometimes you want to answer them and you want to be able to share, but it's okay if you don't. And it's okay if you want to really keep your search in some ways less pressured by other people knowing everything about it. Parents and guardians, I also encourage you to help your junior in this way and try and not to make college every topic of conversation. We often repeat this throughout the senior year. Our counseling department will repeat this as well. Sometimes trying to make college, the conversation that you have once a week at the dinner table, or it happens only on Sunday afternoons, it's something that actually helps to save your relationships and helps to keep things a little bit less tense at home. I often find that when I'm working with a student and their family, sometimes families want to have private email conversations just to inform me about things that have been conversations they've been having at home or that they haven't been having at home. And again, I think about this as a partnership, and that's the way our college office really conducts ourselves in the search process. So why are we here tonight at this time in the process? School is just starting up. You're just starting your coursework, and you don't have any deadlines ahead of you right now. But we also realize that it's a bit insane, the world of college. I know if you're receiving as many emails from test prep organizations and other folks that have an opinion on college as I do, you probably want to cut that noise a little bit. The noise about college is kind of everywhere. And I think it's especially true this year when there is some uncertainty. There's some uncertainty about testing. There's some uncertainty about being able to actually get out and visit colleges. Last year we certainly saw quite a bit about that as well. And we want to make sure that you realize that even though it feels sometimes like you're behind, that's what all those emails try and tell you. You are not behind. You're exactly where you need to be. It's almost a full year before the process really unfolds and applications will be submitted next fall. If you hear nothing else tonight, we want to make sure that you hear the word summer, 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 summer. Even talking with seniors this year, and as much as we said summer last spring, could they have made better use of their summertime? Yes, they probably could have. And other than 1 month of vacation, the college office is actually available to you to be able to engage with you this summer and to be able to help make sure that you're front loading a lot of the part of the process. So there's lots to do that you can prepare, but summer is where you'll find that you have time and capacity to really think deeply about the applications. We're going to talk a little bit more about times when you can visit colleges, appropriate times to visit. We're going to run through a lot of sort of what lies ahead in the rest of our conversation. Recognize though that a year from now, you are going to be experts in the schools that you're considering. You might actually know more about your schools than I do or the other college counselors do, because you're going to be the one that is doing that research, and it's going to be research that's important to you. So think about this process as about something that's going to be fun, but also note that we've got the structure in place to help shepherd you, help you through the search, the discovery, the application, the strategy, and also the decision making. So I wanted to talk a little bit about all the different factors that go into the application review. And I always like to think about it in terms of what you can control and what perhaps you cannot control. And you can see from the graphic on the slide here that there are all sorts of things that play into the selection of students and really the higher education process overall and what you're going to be looking at in the next several months, the next year. In terms of your application, it's important to note that you run on your academic record. Colleges really look at grades, obviously, but they also look at your rigor of your curriculum. And they always look at that in the context of what Berkeley Carroll offers. I think that's really important. I think sometimes you go and you visit colleges and their default sometimes is to talk about rigor in terms of AP or IB programs. The truth is, when they look at the rigor of your curriculum, the way that you challenge yourself within the curriculum offered at Berkeley Carroll is by looking at Berkeley Carroll. And in a little bit, I'll share with you a little bit about what I mean by looking at that context. You're also going to hear colleges talk about their holistic review process. So yes, transcript is going to be the cornerstone because it has your grades and it has the rigor of your curriculum, but your letters of recommendation, your essays, your extracurricular activities, all of those are going to figure into a holistic review process. Now, colleges will enroll students from independent schools, from public schools, from all sorts of different types of curricula across many different countries, not just the US. So they do see a lot of different types of programs. And we're all a little bit like apples and oranges. So this context of what students experience at Berkeley Carroll and how our students take advantage of what's available is really important. You'll also begin to learn that colleges and universities are really searching for reasons to admit students. You hear a lot about, we want to admit a well-rounded student, but really they want a well-rounded student body. And sometimes they have specific things that they really like to see in an application or in a supplement and what a student's writing or in their record. And we help to guide you through that part of the process as well. It's also important to understand that if you've been through the process before, parents or guardians with your own process or even older kids, it may be a little bit different this time around just because students are different from one another. And colleges have more national and global application pools generally. The number of applicants they receive has increased, and that definitely happened certainly last year with schools not requiring standardized testing, and we will talk about standardized testing as well. But the most selective colleges in the country are probably more selective than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's more important than ever to ensure that your college list, and when that list is finalized, that it's balanced and it's realistic and it's well reasoned. We want you to reach for things, but we also want to make sure that you've got enough options to choose from. So our advice is intended to give you that kind of choice and those kinds of options. Just like the process has changed, the college themselves have changed. I remember thinking about, thinking back on my own process and looking back on the kinds of colleges I was considering, those colleges are pretty different now. Colleges and universities that you might have been familiar with from the 80s, like when I was applying to college, they're going to be very different places. So, family members especially, be prepared to learn about new colleges and universities and names that might not be familiar. Initially, we all start thinking about the names of colleges that we know. There's rankings, there's college football teams, there's, aunt so-and-so went to this college and cousin so-and-so went to that one. But our goal is to be able to broaden your experience with colleges and make sure that this process leads to a place that's going to be a good fit for you and not just a list of colleges names that you already know, essentially. So we hope that you keep an open mind and hope that you keep the funnel wide so that at the start of your search, you have many, many different opportunities. And then we kind of narrow it in terms of the criteria that you're thinking about. There's also demographic and institutional priorities that can affect an application. And I think some of these are important to hear about. There was an article in the New York Times the other day that said 59.5% of graduating high school seniors applying to college identify as female. That means something when you're applying to college and you are a young woman who identifies as female. We want to make sure that we think about those things with you. The ability to pay can sometimes be a factor in admission decisions, especially at the margins, or whether if it's early decision versus regular decision. Sometimes early decision can bring better funding or more opportunity. And then full pay students can be sometimes unexpectedly awarded scholarships. I've had students say to me, wow, I didn't know I would get $5,000 from this school. That's pretty exciting. So sometimes things like that will happen, not because you've applied somewhere for a scholarship, but they offer that as part of the way that they're trying to get you to enroll at their institution. Colleges can have objective criteria, talking about grades and scores when appropriate, and program that they care about, but they also care about who they're going to admit to their community. So the personal factors that might come across in an essay, the personal factors that might come across in a letter of recommendation. If I can remember my time sitting in an admission committee and saying, gosh, this is a student that I'd like to have as a roommate. I think we should really think about their candidacy as a part of our community. Again, the transcript and the academic record is what you sort of run on primarily, but those other factors can be pretty important too. Admission to one program within a university could be very different than another program. I remember a student a couple of years ago looking at film programs within a particular university, and that was very different than if she was planning on majoring in psychology or business. So we'll help to guide you with those factors. Global, geographic, socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, and gender diversity can all be factors in creating a campus community that reflects the world in which we live. So as we're talking about these sort of institutional priorities and these things that you can control, recognize that there's some things you can't control. And we can be as helpful as possible in helping to guide you on some of these factors. There may just be factors that we don't have a lot of control over. So making sure that making sure that list of colleges that you apply to is balanced and fair, and that we've really thought about that funnel is really important. Finally, while early decision plans can really boost at some places the probability of acceptance, it's also a choice to be made carefully and strategically. It may not move the needle at some schools as far as you're hoping, especially schools that are far reaches, but it could, looking back on profiles from prior years and looking at your students' context and information and their particular application, it may be that it could make a big difference. So we'll always advise you about those things as well. We like to think about building the college list as building this balanced list. It's a project that includes both heart and head. So there's a love for a school, and then there's also fit. There's also campus life, and then there's also strategy. And it all actually begins with realistic self-assessment. You know, what are you really looking for, and what are you trying to get out of your college experience? So there's both objective and some subjective measures that I would say we talk about through this process. Finally, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, and of course you need no reminder of this, but we are still in the midst of a global pandemic. That's still part of what we're experiencing with our students and families. We counseled our students in the class of 2021. We had 2 meetings before we were no longer in the building. Successfully counseled them through a great decision-making process. And we began with the current seniors as Zoom buddies, and finally have had the opportunity to welcome students into our offices just this year. So we've been through some of this process with students through this global pandemic, but there's going to be challenges and things that make the process harder and easier that lie ahead. And we're going to do our best to help you see those, both the roadblocks and the advantages and the highlights ahead. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Leah Williams. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can expect in the coming months. Though we're still going to be in the thick of the fall application season with the class of 2021, we will have the opportunity to meet with the junior class as a whole in November a few times to talk about a number of things related to the college process. During those initial meetings, we think a lot about how we're going to get to know your students and how we're going to get to know what they're looking for a college. And to start, we'll ask them to fill out a form called the 20 qualities that will make a college right for you. And then we're going to introduce them to SCORE, which is the platform that we use to manage the application process and the search process. With SCORE, we'll be able to send out their documents like transcripts and letters of recommendation when the time comes. And students will be able to navigate their college lists on SCORE. So where they're thinking about applying, places that they're researching, things that they might just be still interested in. And ultimately, they'll have a list of schools that they're applying to in SCORE that will be able to help them shape. And of course, we're going to assign them their college counselor so that they can start building that relationship. And all that will happen next month after we sort of wrap up some of those early applications with the seniors. We're also going to ask students to complete an additional SCORE questionnaire to help us get to know them a little bit better. It sort of jumpstarts that process, but we don't want parents to feel left out because we also have a 30+ questionnaire for you. We want to know where our students are feeling about the process, but we also think that it's really important to understand where parents and guardians are at the start of this process. So while it's really your students' search process, it's really, they're the ones driving the car, so to speak. We also want to know where you stand with all this happening. When students finish their questionnaire, they're going to reach out to Ms. Dunn to set up their first meeting with their college counselor. And then once that happens, we'll be able to have a meeting with the family as well. And what we want to do in that second meeting is make sure that students leave with a list about 30 schools to get started on the search process. So one thing that we want to reiterate from the very beginning is that that list of colleges, it's about 30 schools. We label them foundation, middle, and reach, so students have a sense of where their academics might place them in a given college's pool. But it's just a preliminary list. It's not the list that they are required to apply to. It's just a place to get them to start thinking about what's out there. As Ms. Middleton mentioned, there are a lot of schools that students haven't thought about. You know, most students know about 30 or 40, if even that many, names of schools. So our goal is to sort of help expand that list that they know and get them started on what might be possible for them in the applications for the fall. We also want you to know that you're not limited to just 2 meetings with us. We were at a conference in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, and I heard a statistic at one of the workshops I went to that said the average student gets 38 minutes of college counseling in the United States. And that number sort of surprised me because I can count sometimes the hours upon hours that I've been able to spend with the students that I counsel. And I think Mr. Almonte and Ms. Middleton would be able to say the same. And so we spend quite a bit of time with each student, getting to know them, getting to know their academic interests, their personal interests, as we help guide them through the process. And so it's not just those 2 initial meetings, but we fully expect to meet with both them and often with you throughout the process, beginning in the spring and into the fall of the senior year. Those meetings will begin. So our first meetings will be in January, but some students, if you're going away for the fall or for the spring semester, will actually start those meetings before you attend your away program. And so just looking ahead a bit, Ms. Middleton mentioned the summer, because we want you to sort of be thinking about how you're going to best utilize your summer, but that's because we don't want you to waste time, right? So in the summer, what we're hoping students will do is to use those months wisely. It's a great time to produce a draft of your Common Application essay. We're going to offer a few essay writing workshops and Common Application workshops throughout the summer, so we have a chance for every student to attend one of those. We also think it's a great time to complete the Common Application itself. You know, we have one centralized application that is used by over 1,000 colleges in the United States and even some schools abroad. And the beauty of the Common Application is that when your parents applied, they had to use a typewriter, send out to many different schools. You're going to fill out one application. And just about every school you apply to use it. There are a few other applications out there that may come into your process, but we can sort of navigate that when the time comes. But we want you to make sure that that's something you come back to school with in September, ready to go. We'll also do our reboot camp this year. Last year, we did things a little bit differently because of COVID, but we're really excited to bring that back into our process. And that'll be something to help kick off the application season in the fall. And then when you get into school, you'll start meeting with your college counselor again, but it's also around the time you'll start thinking about where you're going to apply and if you're going to be submitting an early application. So many of our students will apply early to a school, either early action or early decision. And we like to know that by the first week in October. And then by the end of October, we've asked students to submit their final college list. So that's what our current seniors are going through right now. So as a reminder, in the summer, we are available for you. We're here 2/3 of the summer to meet, to talk about your college list, to brainstorm essays, to do practice interviews, really anything you need from us, we are available to do for you. And I think our students are pretty good at advocating for themselves and taking advantage of the fact that they have a college counselor who's going to work closely with them through every part of this process. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Almonte, who's going to talk a little bit about starting the search.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mr. Almonte, and to kind of build off what my colleague, Ms. Williams said, is as we mentioned that we are going to create a college list, but before that happens, it really is a kind of in-depth period of self-assessment, we would say, and self-reflection. And there's going to be a number of surveys that we send out, which Ms. Williams touched on. But really, it kind of starts with you building a relationship with yourself and understanding what you want and what you need in the next phase of your life. Really kind of understanding this large question of who are you, right? And that can be a very daunting question to be asked as a 16 or 17-year-old in high school who's still kind of figuring some things out, or maybe doesn't know what they want to do with their life in terms of a career. but this is really where you get to kind of figure that part out, right? And really kind of take the time to reflect on those questions, which you'll be asked a lot of. And I really, that the point of that is to kind of get a better understanding of who you are, what you want in your college process, to better guide this process and this list for you to basically end up at a school that is checking off all your boxes in terms of what it is that you'd like. And really kind of doing a deeper dive and considering, what size school seems ideal to you. I think in my experience, in all of our experiences, we worked with a number of students who want a small school, or because they've been in Berkeley Carroll for so long or an independent school for so long, they're looking for a larger institution and want to go to a medium or larger size school, and really understanding what that might be like and having conversations with your college counselor about the benefits and the experiences that might differ from, Berkeley Carroll. Thinking about geographic location, is there a part of the country that you want to be in? Do you see yourself going to school locally, regionally, nationally, or do you see yourself going international to another country and having a really fun experience or different experience? These are definitely conversations that we invite, or we, advise that students start thinking about, because it really kind of helps guide the process. Um, how do you learn best is another question that we really kind of lean on, because for a student that likes, seminar discussions, a large lecture at a large public institution probably isn't the best fit for you. So colleges and universities are really going to kind of hone in on this, like, what is the fit? Is there a good fit for this school? And when they're reviewing applications, a lot of times it's all about this word fit. And really that process starts the beginning of your college process, and figuring out how to navigate what schools you're looking at, what's the right environment for you, and where you can see yourself in the next couple of years. Before Thanksgiving break is the time when we're going to share these surveys that Ms. Williams talked about. And basically it's going to be a survey that's completed. So it's 2 surveys that the students will complete and 1 that the parents will complete as well too, to really kind of gather this information and be able to guide you, like she said, and really understanding how you can do research throughout this process. So once we gather all this information, eventually creating a list, but a lot of times the first meeting is really us kind of going through this data and having larger in-depth conversations about some of the answers that you provided, to help us gauge a better understanding what schools might be the right fit for you. And as Ms. Williams mentioned, creating a balanced list that'll help guide you as a starting point. With these 30 schools, you are not, obligated to just these 30 schools. We encourage you to kind of open up and look at other schools as well too. But I think keeping an open form of communication really is helpful, because we want to know if the school's within range, if it's a good fit, or if there's any insight that we can provide as your college counselor that we generally might know about the school. It's always great to lean on us as a source of research. The biggest thing that we say in terms of research is to really keep this process focused on you. Ms. Middleton mentioned this noise that's going to be kind of perpetuating throughout this process. And a lot of times you kind of have to keep a tunnel vision in terms of like what it is that you want. So, there might be a school that you and your friends might be looking at, and one of them might have visited first and said, like, I didn't like it at all. It was X, Y, and Z. But really, you haven't had the opportunity to research that school or go to an information session or tour to understand if it might be something that you like. Everybody is very different in this process. Everybody connects to different types of schools. Everyone has a different personality, and it really plays a vital role in understanding, your research process and how it's individualized. This is not a collective class assignment. It's an individual experience that's similar in terms of process and structure, but that's an individualized as it pertains to your experience. And then thinking about, kind of where to start with, I would say basic research in the beginning. We have our guide to the college process handbook for Berkeley Carroll families. So as you can see, there's a picture of that on the PowerPoint. It's currently being updated with edits right now, but that should be updating shortly. And when it does, we'll contact families and let them know. But this is a good indicator for you to kind of just understand where you're at in this journey, kind of what's coming up next and the phases that will happen. and really understanding how you can do some research and start this process. There is a current version of that on our website right now, which you're more than welcome to look at. But I would say there are some things that are changing. I would say mainly it's going to be the elimination of subject tests. So if you see anything about that, I would say pay that no mind, as that's going to be edited out of the future version that's coming shortly. So in terms of kind of doing a deeper dive into research, Ms. Williams mentioned SCORE. So SCORE is this software system that we use, and it really kind of works as a amazing kind of in-depth look at different schools. You can see, you know, data in terms of what the school's profile and what they're looking for academically. You can see size of the school, popular majors. They have different videos that you can see. So once you have access to SCORE, that's a really good resource to utilize and lean on to really kind of go through this college process. So when you get your list of 30 schools, start looking at different schools that you see on your list to see if it's kind of checking out what it is that you like. But the biggest thing that we can say is do research and do lots of it. You know, you can start by visiting schools' websites. So, you know, it's visiting their admissions page. If you know what major you're interested in, visiting the department's page and looking at some of the curriculum that they offer and seeing the opportunities that you might have at that school academically is always a great start. And otherwise, you know, thinking about schools in generally, what is their curriculum offering? So for instance, if we're thinking about Columbia University, they have something that's called the core curriculum. So every student is going to have to take classes that are similar in experience in terms of subject before they dive into their major. So it's kind of like it sets the playing field for everybody to have the same academic coursework before they go off into their major, which is really great. But for some other schools, like for instance, Sarah Lawrence, there's just some distribution requirements that have to be met before you can kind of tailor your education process and academic curriculum to be anything that it is that you want it to be. You know, really checking out the schools and understanding what they offer is, you know, key in this point. And a lot of times it's understanding not just the academics, but also the social life and the location of the college as well too. When we're thinking about, you know, our location in New York City, you know, there's a ton of schools that you could check out that just vary in academic like philosophy as well as location and size. And really understanding that taking advantage of virtual options is something that we tell our students to do too, or physically get there as well. We're going to gift all of you a FISC guide. So it's this really large book. It looks like a phone book, if you know what that is. I don't know if they have those anymore. But the FISC guide is a really amazing resource because it has a comprehensive list of schools that you can basically look at. And it gives in about a page or a page and a half write-up. It details the culture of the schools, the academics, popular programs, traditions, like really cool things that are happening on campus. So it's a really good snapshot of what that school might be like. So it makes the process pretty easy and pretty digestible if you're looking at schools and kind of flipping back and forth between your book of what schools you're identifying or looking into and kind of going from there. Again, we will be sending a copy of the FISC guide to every student in the junior class. So that's something that you have to purchase on your own, and that's completely on Berkeley Carroll. And we also say that take advantage of campus visits and do research during the holiday break. So once I would advise that you meet with your college counselor once you're assigned, you know, really dive into this process for us to get to know who you are. We'll create a list of foundations, middles, and reach schools for you. And then from there, that allows you the opportunity by, I would say, January to February to really kind of go in and start doing some personalized research. In February, you're going to have 2 days for holiday break where you'll be able to go and visit campuses, whether you plan to do that virtually or plan to do that in person. I think it's a key time to do that. And a really awesome time and a really vital time that I think can prove beneficial for a lot of our students is to utilize spring break. At that point, it's really kind of introducing yourself into this process, getting your feet wet, and really kind of starting to take some giant steps forward in terms of your list. And a lot of times that will put you in a really good place for summer, which I know we highlighted earlier, to be able to start narrowing down your list and doing the next phases of your process once you have a more or less rough draft of a list which can be helpful by summer. Big Future is another really great web source that you can take advantage of, as well as SCORE, College Navigator, Fair Test, and Financial Aid. These are all going to be really helpful resources throughout the entire process. And I think one of the most vital kind of pieces of information or pieces of connection that can make this process make a lot more sense is connecting with BC alum that are going to different colleges and universities. A lot of times that might be the first interaction or some of the later interactions that you have once you've identified a school that you like. And really being able to sit down and talk with someone and say, hey, you know, I just really want to get to know like what your experience was like. What's the social life like? What do you do after school? How are your classes? And have a more in-depth conversation with somebody who's familiar with Berkeley Carroll and has been through this process before. The biggest thing, again, that we can say is lean on your counselor. We are here every step of the way, and we are here to help you understand this process, make it digestible for you, point you in the right direction, help you identify schools. If there's schools that you don't like on the list, be able to suggest more schools for you. But really, we are kind of your guide throughout this entire process and kind of like your mentor to make sure that we're your second set of eyes, that we're listening to you, that we're getting to know you and guiding you accordingly. That is our role. So please, you know, utilize us. And what I will say is when we create a list, you know, we're taking a lot of things into consideration, both academic and personality as it relates to the student and the answers that they provided in the survey, as well as the interactions that we've had with them. And really, you know, I want to kind of, if we can go to the next slide, I want to kind of vocalize that, you know, what your starting point is going to be kind of what sets the tone. So, you know, if you're starting with a reach school or a school that's not on the list, or maybe it's like a super reach, that might be the first school that your student sees and they fall in love with, right? Is that the best, you know, I would say tactic throughout this process? Probably not, right? And I think that we have to understand the profile of the student and understand what's realistic in terms of reaches, middles, and foundations. You know, we've had some experiences where students have latched onto a school and it's been a pretty tough conversation to say like, hey, this is probably going to be unlikely. So really thinking about where it is that you're taking your student or where you're going to visit as a student is ideal, because, you know, the process of creating a balanced list a lot of times is going to be weighted on academics. But what we would say is, you know, taking local visits to inform your student of, you know, what the size of the campus might be like is a good idea. You know, thinking about a small, medium, or large campus. If, for instance, if we're thinking about New York City, NYU is an urban campus. While if you take a student possibly to Columbia, if that's on their list, or a school that you're looking at, that's more of a traditional campus. You know, if you're looking at the new school, that's a very different school. So even just within our backyard of New York City, there's so many different institutions that vary when we're thinking of just the type of school that you're looking at. And a lot of times when you're kind of doing this research process and doing this touring kind of sector of the process, really kind of understanding and being purposeful about where it is that you're going, or being purposeful about why you're visiting that campus to get a sense of this, is really kind of key as you're visiting schools. You can sign up for official campus tours and information sessions. And a lot of times it starts by just getting on the mailing list of a school, visiting their website, putting in your information. And a lot of times I would say that this is a general first interaction, is really kind of sitting down, whether in person or virtual, to get a general sense of what the school is like, and go on a walking tour or virtual tour to get a idea of the physical space of the campus, to understand if this is the right place for you. And then understanding the different opportunities that schools offer. You know, I think with this past year and COVID, they've really kind of created a robust option for virtual visits. So understanding that, you know, for some families that it's not as accessible, or people have different busy schedules, or there might be a college that's in California, really understanding that that's not going to happen on a whim. I'm just like, hey, I'm going to go to California next week to see this school when you're in the middle of the school year. But understanding that virtual options are just as effective sometimes, with some later kind of yield events, or different types of prospective student events that you'll be able to take advantage of later. Some of those examples of those are being able to observe a student and have a conversation with them, take a class. So there are some schools that will allow you to sit in a class and get what the feel of the academic environment is like. Or if you want to kind of attend an open house and talk to different departments and get different, learn about different facets of the school, that's also something that you would be able to do as well too. Understanding that there are different resources and different factors that might be driving your process. So you might be an athlete, or maybe you're really looking for, different resources as it relates to identity. Yeah, and really being able to make those connections and understand what is offered at the school and how they're going to be able to support you might also be something that you pay attention to too as you navigate this process. And like we said, making use of virtual options. All right. Class 2 years ago, not this class, the year before that, they did the entire process basically virtual, and they saw great success. I think at first it was a little daunting for them, but understanding that there were a lot of resources that colleges created for them to understand, how to do research virtually and engage with the admissions officers and presentations virtually to make them make the best informed decision. And we continue to tell students to still lean on that, even though we are in an in-person, I would say, type of climate in certain places. Virtual options can be just as effective. And really kind of understanding that once all of this information has been absorbed and you have a good understanding of the school, then it's probably a good idea to contemplate interviewing. And a lot of times interviews can be informative as well as evaluative. So I would say that usually by the end of junior year into the summer, going into senior year is when interviews are offered for your class. And being able to interview, I think, adds an extra layer of the yourself into the application process. So they get to have a conversation with you, whether virtual and in person, and really get to know who you are and your personality. Kind of taking your personality and making pop off the paper is very. You can do that so much in an application. This will be like an actual conversation. And I would say have conversations with your counselor when this comes up about whether interviews are like an option. Usually larger institutions or state schools do not offer interviews. More of the smaller liberal arts colleges or more of these selective mid-sized colleges will offer interviews. We will help students prepare for interviews. And I can't say it enough that, starting this process in the summer, maybe getting some of your interviews out of the way first, will free up a lot of time in the fall semester for you to focus on applications, wrap up your interview, wrap up your interviews, wrap up your essay and your supplements. So really kind of understanding how you can prioritize this application and where interviews fit in for that are necessary. Realistically, I would say an interview is going to be something that some students want to do and others do not. I'd say if you do well with interpersonal connection, if you're great at sharing your personality and your experiences and you're well informed about the school, we definitely want to get you in front of some colleges to interview. But I would say it's going to be case by case in terms of what a student is looking for or what their list looks like. And the final thing we'll say is, really follow your observations and your gut instincts. I would say a good chunk of this is going to be looking at academics and social fit. And a lot of times really kind of following your heart and following your gut about what it is that you feel when you visit a school. If you feel like it's the right, campus climate for you, if you feel like it's the right academic environment for you, that's what we ask you to lean into. Because this is going to be where you're going to school, and you're going to hear a lot of people, telling you what's a great school for you, or what is the greatest place that you could be at, or they had a great education experience here. But knowing that you're in this driver's seat is ideal, because this is going to be the next 4 or 5 years of your life.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. I'm going to talk a little bit about the application itself, because I think it's important to highlight some of these things. We've talked about some of them. We will talk about some of them. Ms. Williams is going to address a little bit about standardized testing somewhat after I talk. So I wanted to highlight just a few of these areas. An application can include all of these. It could. And the right-hand photo is quite literally what I used to look at when I get a pile of applications to read, and we'd be reading through pages after pages after pages. Now colleges read online, so they know exactly what they're looking for, they know exactly what to look at. And things have changed. Like I said earlier, things have changed a bit from perhaps when I applied to college, or parents and guardians, if you had gone through the same process. I think the Common Application is one thing that has made this process so much easier for students. It's now used by nearly 1,000 colleges, some international, and plenty of domestic schools, both private and public schools, are using the Common Application. There's other applications that your students might end up filling out. Georgetown and MIT have their own, University of California system has their own application. So there are other formats of applications that we help students work on as well. But primarily, most of our students are using the Common Application. What's common is the central data, the information that a student fills out in terms of their name and their address and the school they attend and their extracurricular activities and their main Common Application essay or personal statement, as it's sometimes called. And then many of the colleges will have some kind of a supplemental essay where they will want to know what a student knows about a school and how it might be the best fit for them. So very often we'll call these essays the Why Blank College essay. I've started to call it Why Us essay, because it's really a match between the student and the school. We help students with all of these pieces, making sure that they are writing essays that reveal things about themselves to help the colleges know about them, using a vehicle that helps them to reveal that. And then in their supplemental essays, making sure that they're making the right connections to the academic programs they're most interested in, or the salient points of the school's profile that they connect to the most. I mentioned earlier that the transcript and the grades and the what a student's taking at Berkeley Carroll are going to be some of the most important pieces. I would say, except if we're talking about a school that is really audition or portfolio based, if it's an art school or if a student is applying to specifically a music program or specifically a performance program, in those cases, those portfolios or auditions might be really important. But for the most part, the transcript is going to provide sort of the core of what they're looking at, with all these other pieces enabling a student to be able to tell a little bit more about what that transcript means. So teachers are really going to be able to comment on what a student has done in the classroom, talk about their strengths, talk about their areas of growth. An interview, as Mr. Almonte said, if they're offered, can really help a student come right off the page, and their personal traits can be highlighted in that way. A student's involvement in extracurricular activities and co-curricular activities and stuff they've done during the summer, that demonstrates how they will be as a student involved on their campus. So all of these are going to be important factors in what colleges call a holistic application process. I mentioned before that when schools are looking at the transcript and they're looking at a student's grades year after year, these are year end or semester end grades. So for sophomore classes that were semester long, those semester end grades will be part of that transcript. For a year course like Myths and Legends or Advanced Algebra 2, those will be year-long grades. So it's a little bit different than what you're used to looking at on a report card or on a grade report when you're looking at anecdotals. It's really mostly the numbers. What we provide in addition to letters of recommendation and counselor letter of recommendation is something called a school profile. And the school profile, which is probably not showing up very well, is something that you can actually find on our website. You can actually, it'll be something that we'll walk through with you in our first meetings with you, to make sure that you have a pretty solid control and understanding over what it is that we're presenting to colleges and how your student's transcript or how your transcript as a student is presented. It provides information about that context, like I said, about the curriculum overall, and also about unique and special programs that Berkeley Carroll offers. So the information that's being sent to colleges is not just the numbers, not just the transcript, but really a comprehensive piece that helps colleges to know a lot about what your students are experiencing or what you're experiencing as a student. A word about activities, because I think that's a question that comes up very often. The application, or the common application specifically, offers 10 possible slots for activities. And for some of you, 10 doesn't sound like very much. For others, gosh, where am I going to find 10 activities that I've been involved in? But they can be summer jobs, internships, co-curriculars, athletics, affinity groups, performing and visual arts, debate, service, youth group, even significant responsibilities at home. So the colleges do expect that a student will have a level of involvement, but they're not expecting that every student is involved in everything. Students do make choices on the things that they like more than others. Sometimes they do a little bit of sampling at the beginning of high school and then settle into the activities that they're most involved in. But summers count, the work that students have done in co-curriculars and affinity groups, all of this counts as part of that 10 list of possible activities. And yes, students do list less than 10. That's not an unusual thing for colleges to see either. We do help them to organize those activities and the little blurbs that they're able to write about the activities. We make sure that they're including the appropriate information and that they're presenting the information how they should, so that colleges really have an understanding of the importance of the particular thing that they've been involved in. And then, as I said, as you notice at the bottom here, I've listed portfolio or abstract. We rely on our partners in music and visual arts and in theater. So if a student is presenting a portfolio or doing an audition, we've got colleagues in those departments, you probably know them well, who help students to be able to pull together their portfolio work. And in the case of an abstract, if a student is doing, for example, a senior scholars program, or they've really been involved in SRD and they're doing a project for SRD as a senior, we have them put together an abstract, which includes what they plan to do for their project and what that will eventually look like. So colleges are often very, very impressed by what students are able to do at the high school level through either one of those programs. I have students who might do independent studies, and that's another thing that a student can include, kind of an abstract or a description of that independent study, so that they're able to present that to colleges. I think we've talked about most of these other things. I want to spend just a couple of moments more talking about recommendation letters, so that you know when those recommendations will be requested, how the process works overall. On the left-hand side of the screen, I've listed some of the things that typically a recommendation will ask about. It's not just about a grade or about, how much a student has raised their hand in class. Certainly, all of these things on the left-hand side could be things that would be applicable to students. And we're really proud that our teachers write beautiful letters of recommendation. They really know the students in their classes. I know it's been challenging over the last year with Zoom classes and students wondering if teachers will know them well enough. What colleges mostly ask is that students ask two teachers in academic subjects, different academic subjects, so not two English teachers or two math teachers, different academic subjects who have taught them in the 11th or 12th grades. So occasionally there are schools that will say it's okay to submit something from a 10th grade teacher, but the ideal thing is if a teacher has seen a student over the course of a couple of years and they're really able to talk about their growth and their successes overall. If a student is applying to an arts program or they just have significant involvement in the arts, that is something that sometimes students will ask, or they may be required to ask if it's a program that requires that. We have students make those formal requests in May, giving teachers the opportunity to be able to do some writing during the summer. So by the end of May, we ask that students have those two teachers selected. If students are going on a semester program, they may choose one of those semester teachers to write on their behalf. And then finally, the school report / counselor letter is what we write on behalf of students. So these are a little bit different than a teacher letter in that it's much more of a floodlight, what a student did overall in their experience at Berkeley Carroll, including highlights of their extracurriculars, including some of their personality and characteristics, and also an overview of their academics. So teachers really give you the slice slice of life within the classroom. They're able to comment on things that really will help an admission office see who a student might be in a classroom, sitting around a seminar table, writing papers at the college level. And then the counselor letter provides a little bit more of that context. We help colleges understand our curriculum, but also help colleges understand our students' strengths. So we gather a lot of information to be able to write those letters. Wanted to give you the heads up on that because that is something that your students you will be asking for by the end of this year. And then finally, I'm going to switch it over to Ms. Williams. We're going to talk a little bit about testing. Ms. Williams is going to talk a little bit about testing. We'll spend a few minutes on financial aid, and then the program will turn to questions. So thank you so much for your attention.
And I get to talk about everybody's favorite subject, standardized test prep. So last spring, we partnered with Compass Prep to offer you 2 practice tests. So most, if not all of you, have taken a full-length practice ACT and a full-length practice SAT. But next, you're going to take the October 16th PSAT. And how we want you to think about that is it's a practice for the practice, even though you've already taken a full-length version of it. This is a shortened version of the SAT. And the difference is you'll be taking this test under typical testing conditions. Most of you will be in the cafeteria with many of your classmates. It'll be timed, it'll be very quiet. It'll feel a little bit more like what it'll be like when you take the test next spring for the official versions. We just want to remind you that the PSAT is one of the qualifying exams for the National Merit Scholarship Corporation. And each year they recognize about 3% of the 1.5 million test takers who are the highest scorers in the country. It can also be a qualifying test for the recognition programs for students who have a cumulative GPA of 3.5 or higher, who identify as African American, Hispanic, Latinx, Indigenous, or who attend a school in a rural area or small town. So make sure you have that on your calendar. October 16th, you'll be taking the PSAT. But we also want you to take that because it'll help you in your process of determining which test to take. If you're not sure which is your best test, part of the reason why we partnered with Compass Prep is because they were happy to give you an overview of the testing landscape last May, but also if you want to sit down with them and talk about the results of those tests that you took, they will help you figure out which test will work best for you. So we'll resend out that link to the testing overview that Adam Ingersoll at Compass Prep did last spring. Regardless of which test you settle on, they're interchangeable by colleges. So you should mostly just take the test that feels right to you. So some folks will want to know when you should start thinking about these tests and when you should start thinking about prep. So many of you have already started, some of you, I wouldn't say many, some of you have started prepping already, and a handful of you might have already taken your first tests, and most of you are still making some decisions, which is totally fine. This is really the time to do that, and there are a lot of options to consider, so no one is behind when it comes to test prep. Ideally, you want to start prepping for the test by thinking about when you're going to take your first SAT or ACT. What we don't want is for you to spend all of your time thinking about these exams because we want you to still do well in your classes at Berkeley Carroll. You should have received an email from me about a week ago regarding the opportunity to take either an SAT or ACT course through Berkeley Carroll. And we partner with Bespoke Education to offer those courses. And we do that because our goal is just to make sure that every student at BC has access to affordable test prep if they choose to use it. But we want you to remember that Bespoke and Compass are not the only ways to go for test prep. Some students are going to utilize some free resources like the Khan Academy, which you'll actually be able to take your PSAT results, and Khan Academy will develop a personalized study plan for you. Other students may use test prep books. So we have a bunch of SAT and ACT prep books in our offices if you want to stop by and pick one up. However you choose to prepare for these tests is really up to you. And we're here to talk you through those decisions if you need us. And any questions you may have, you can come to us about those. We also want to talk a little bit about the idea of test optional. I feel like I just spent a few minutes talking about test prep and taking the tests and not necessarily the fun part, but a lot of schools in this country, nearly 1,700 colleges and universities are test optional. Before COVID hit, there were about 1,000 schools that were already allowing students to apply test optional. And some of them are names you may recognize, like Bowdoin, Colorado College, Wesleyan, Sarah Lawrence, many others. But given the difficulties that students had in facing and securing seats at test centers, a large majority of the schools are continuing to remain test optional this year. And some are piloting 3-year programs and will remain test optional into 2023. So there's a website that we really want you to look at. It's called fairtest.org. That's going to provide you with the most up-to-date list of colleges that will allow students to apply without submitting an SAT or ACT. So if you decide to apply to colleges not using testing, colleges are going to evaluate your application holistically. They may take a closer look at your transcript, your letters of recommendation, your essay, and other parts of your application. But what they will not do is stop to wonder why you didn't submit testing with your application. We actually had the VPs of enrollment from Harvey Mudd and WashU in St. Louis talk to our seniors and their families a couple of weeks ago and really explain to them that test optional means test optional. And if you are, one thing we do want to know is that if you're considering applying to college in the UK or Canada or other international institutions, you may find that they rely a little bit more heavily on testing. And so some of those schools, if they make their way onto your college list, your counselor will help you navigate those options. Mostly, we want you to remember that that colleges use tests as one part of their evaluations. We don't think any student's going to be reduced to a test score. But a good way to gauge whether or not you're in that college's range of testing is to look at the middle 50% of the scores on their website under their admitted student profiles. And your goal, if you're going to submit testing, is to be at the middle or the higher end of that range. And one thing to keep in mind is because many schools were test optional, because many students didn't have the opportunity to take multiple tests, those students who submit their tests were among the highest scorers. So as you begin your research, that's something you definitely want to keep in mind. And when it's time to actually apply to college, your counselor is going to help guide you on how best to use your scores, whether to your advantage by sending them or to your advantage by keeping them away from the schools. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Almonte, who's going to talk a little bit about financial aid before we wrap up.
Hi, everyone. So in regards to financial aid, we always say that everybody's financial situation is different or can change or may have changed in recent years. I know the pandemic has had its fair share of effects on people's finances. So the biggest thing we would say is having conversations between the student and the parent about what's affordable right now is really ideal. Understanding that financing an education or college education for 4 years can be pretty expensive. We recently had a financial aid night, which was on the September 21st, which we'll be repeating next fall, as well as there are going to be some joint programming with the Brooklyn Independent Schools this spring. So, if you want to take a look at that presentation, or if you have the opportunity to sit in on it, we actually sent that information to all the families. So I would definitely say look into that program. But usually where we tell families to start is with a tool called the Net Price Calculator. You can find this on the College Board as well as on different financial aid websites for different colleges and universities. And it'll ask you a series of questions based on your financial information. And it's a way to determine the percent of need or your estimated family contribution. So it's going to generate this ballpark figure of what it's expecting that you as a family can pay based off of the financial information that you provided. This figure, we always say, is very much a general ballpark figure. A lot of times there's some details or some nuances about a financial situation that need to be kind of added or explained. So if you are identifying certain schools, having those conversations with those financial aid offices is ideal, especially if things have changed in terms of finances in recent years. As I said, the Net Price Calculator, you can find a series of them on different college websites. So if you have some schools that you're identifying quickly throughout the process, that's definitely where we would say you should start. And then understanding that there's, in terms of financial aid, typically families will get kind of confused about the two, but there's going to be need-based aid and then merit scholarships or merit type of, awards. So for focusing on need-based aid, you're applying for need-based aid because you are going to need some assistance with, financing the education. And typically with need-based aid, different schools will meet a certain percentage of demonstrated need. And they will figure this out by reviewing two applications. So the first one is a free application for federal student aid. So it's the FAFSA. And it's required by all colleges that will qualify a family and the student for aid and typically loans and some type of, if it's qualifying on income, some type of loan or grant that comes from the government, work study, things of that nature. This is typically required by all schools and and all state institutions will require this. See, the CSS profile is another application that you can complete. And basically that is, most private colleges will have a CSS profile, and it's just kind of another form to gauge what your family's financial circumstances are. And with this net price calculator, with this FAFSA and with the CSS profile, they're going to basically figure out what it is that you can afford and then create a financial aid package that can finance that financial gap in terms of being able to afford the tuition or the cost of attendance, as we would say. The CSS profile typically qualifies families for need-based scholarships. So it's the type of money that you don't have to pay back. While FAFSA, like I said, it's going to be more federal grants and loans are typically things that are going to be accruing interest either during the life of the loan or as soon as you graduate, the interest will kick in, and it's the money that you have to pay back. So everybody's financial situation, like I said, will be different, but with those tools and with those applications, you can get a general sense of what it is that you'll be receiving from a school. Aside from that, there are merit scholarships, and typically schools, usually most of the time, there is going to be no additional application process. Through the application review, if they see that your student is a standout student, top of the class, really good grades, maybe strong testing profile, community leader, various leadership positions, they can be nominated for a merit scholarship. And a lot of times we say, like, to go through this process not expecting a merit scholarship, but if you receive one, it's great, right? Because it's a much added surprise. It's money you don't have to pay back. And various merit scholarships exist. Like I said, most of them are going to be based off of profile and involvement, but there might be some specialized merit scholarships that colleges are fielding applicants for. So it's all going to be case by case, but majority of the time there is no application process. And then finally, we always tell our students and our families to take advantage of outside scholarships. So, a really great website that you can see there is FastWeb. There's also a website that we refer our students to called Going Merry. And they have a variety of different scholarships that you can apply to that are completely unrelated to the institution that you're applying for, your financial circumstances. A lot of times it's just basically meeting the criteria, what they're looking for the scholarship. Some of them will require an application. They might require an essay or some of your academic documents. But they have scholarships that range from being left-handed to women in STEM to being first generation. So I would say you really want to kind of assess the financial situation going into this process, utilize the tools and communicate with financial aid offices, and hope for merit scholarships, but proactively look for outside scholarships as finances are playing a key role in navigating this process.
And with that, we've come to the end of our hour and 15 minutes. Hopefully we've answered a number of the questions that you've already had about this process. We will follow up with you and send a calendar of important dates for juniors. As we mentioned previously, our guide to the college process, as soon as that's done with revisions, and you'll be receiving a copy of that FISC guide so you can begin to do your research on schools. So we completely understand if you need to go and have dinner or you need to step out and stretch your legs. If you've got other questions, we're happy to answer those. And it looks like we've got a couple of thank yous and now a couple of questions. I see it says you indicated that summer 2022 students should attend an application essay workshop. Are those with BC Advisors? Yeah, we offer two different kinds of essay preparation. We usually at the end of the junior year, we give the opportunity for students to be able to learn from a presenter, really just talking about the college process in context. So in talking about the college essay and how that figures into it. And then we do hands-on essay workshops during the summer. We usually schedule 5 or 6 of those, try and sprinkle them through the summer months. This year, we actually did, I think, all of them in June, so that nearly all of our current seniors were able to take advantage of that essay writing workshop really at the beginning of the summer, so that the goal was by the end that they would have a solid essay draft. We're going to do probably some revisions. We do revisions every year of the kind of workshops that we offer. So we'll probably do some revisions to those, but we'll still offer about 5 or 6 options for students to take advantage of.
So there's a question, there are 2 questions about testing. One is about signing up for the PSAT. Students don't need to sign up for the PSAT. We're actually going to be sending a lot more communication about that in the coming week or so, but all of the juniors are already signed up for the PSAT if they want to take it. And if I know there was a question about should the student opt out if they're taking the ACT, that is a conversation we can have with individual families to make sure that students are making the right choice. But everybody's got time, everybody signed up, no need to rush through that. And then the test prep options offered through BC with Bespoke will be off. So they're going to be 12-week classes. They'll start at the end of October for the SAT, I believe, and the ACT starts a little bit later. And they're geared towards prepping students for the spring class, for the spring SAT in March and the April ACT. The classes meet on Saturday mornings. They are virtual and they are hosted by Bespoke tutors who are really, really wonderful. Our students have had good experiences. If anyone has questions about that, they can reach out to me directly. Kalia Williams at Berkeley Carroll.
And then we have a question that says, do you think colleges will be allowing students to sit in on class, and how that made an impression when the parent was looking at schools? So I think this is going to be case by case, especially as it relates to COVID. In pre-COVID times, there were a lot of schools that had the option on their visits and tours website page where you would be able to do a class or two to really kind of get a sense of what the academic experience is like. I would say, as you start looking at certain schools or at certain lists, seeing what they offer, but I imagine that it might not be as robust of an offering as it was before, just based off of social distancing and COVID regulations. But I imagine that there are still some schools that are doing some. I think geographic location is going to play a big role in that.
They may also, some schools will offer, if they're doing like virtual open houses, some of them are teaching like master classes. So it's not the same as sitting in on a class, but it is a way to learn the style of teaching and what faculty are like. So getting on schools' mailing lists is the best way to find out about those opportunities. Open houses will happen. Colleges will do those in the spring, especially for juniors. So open houses that are happening now are really for seniors. The spring is really the start of the process for juniors in terms of the way that a lot of colleges are thinking. So they might have, a week-long series of events that include student panels and those kinds of things that are really happening virtually. They've done a lot of really good work in making virtual not as boring as it used to be. So they've really stepped up to the plate in that sense. The question about being away at a semester school, will there be another opportunity to take the PSATs? PSATs are only offered on that October date. So a high school has to choose either a weekday, which is a Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday the 23rd, or we had the option of October 16th. There's no other time that you can take the PSATs, but truly it is meant to be a practice test primarily. For really strong test takers, it can be an opportunity to qualify as a National Merit Scholar. when you think about the numbers of test takers, it's a large number of test takers that are taking that test. And it ends up being about 16,000 students who are semifinalists, about 15,000 who end up being finalists. So it's pretty small numbers that would qualify for that national merit qualification. You know, if a student is thinking about the ACT and they already know that, they don't have to take the PSAT. The only reason would be if they just wanted more experience in taking a test. So I know we don't do a lot of standardized testing, or to qualify for national merit if they're a really strong, really high test taker naturally. Sorry about all of the sounds. Well, it seems like the questions have slowed down, even if the sounds of police cars outside my apartment have not gotten any quieter. We really thank you for your attention tonight. We really are so looking forward to getting back to the start of the process and being able to talk to you. We're thrilled that you're going to be our charges pretty soon. And if you've got follow-up questions, we're going to send the video of this. We'll send the resources that we mentioned to you. If you have quick follow-up questions, we're happy to answer those. But again, we really, really appreciate your patience with us in allowing the class of 2022 to at least embark on the first part of their process. And then, as we said, we will do the counselor assignments, the introduction to SCORE more toward the end of November, and we'll begin our meetings with you in December and January. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your attendance. Have a great night.